Hello everybody and welcome to another Facebook Live from us here at TBA Law. As many of you will know, and if you don't, my name is Rochelle Manderson and I'm one of the solicitors here at TBA Law, and today I will be speaking to you about parenting fur babies. So I've brought along a fur baby here. Her name's Tiffany and she's going to be my co-host at the moment for today. At the moment she's having a lovely chew on her treat, so that should keep her happy while I talk to you about fur babies and your legal situation. So let's get started, hey? You'll notice that all this month we've been focusing on parenting, family law and those sort of things. So when it came my turn to speak to you, as it has today, I thought I would speak to you about these little guys, because in today's world, many of us feel that our pets are part of our family, and rightly so. Many people have pets. Many people have pets and are choosing to have a dog or a cat instead of having children. For so many people, their pet is their child. So this has been a relatively new development. If you look at the sort of the history of people keeping pets and animals, you've got, well, if you take, for example, if you take the dog, you've got dogs being initially kept for what they could do for people: hunting, protection, carting, vermin control. And then you went from there to having some dogs become household pets and companions. And we've come around to where predominantly dogs are pets and companions. And if you're working your dog, you're probably doing it as a hobby. So if you went back 200 years, the thought that somebody would have a dog rather than a child, or that somebody would consider their dog or their cat as akin to their child, would just be unheard of. I mean, that you'd probably been put in an asylum for something like that. But these days, it's absolutely accepted. So, speaking about parenting and children and family law would not be complete without talking about these guys. But the law hasn't quite caught up with society in this. Unfortunately, the law does not see pets as small people. They do not see pets as children. They can take into account a party's relationship with their animal and what they have done and what they do with them and where the animal resides and those sort of things. But the law does not see these guys as children. So even if you do, the law won't. Technically, pets and animals are seen as chattels. What are chattels? Chattels, property, things that you own. And in a way they kind of are, but we don't see them that way. So that is a starting basis point for your legal position if you're talking about your fur babies. So a few things can come up here with parenting fur babies, and you can look at this in all sorts of different ways. So you can look at it as far as, if you're looking at the theme we've been following, if you're looking at what happens to pets in separation. But we can go further than that, because parenting fur babies, we can look at essentially their legal position in many things. We can also look at some of the things that you should take into account legally when you are purchasing or caring for your pet, for your fur baby, and what that means. So we can talk about issues of ownership, because that's something that's quite interesting at the moment. And so there's quite a few things we can cover off. So again, I'll touch briefly on these things, and if anyone would like to hear more about any of the issues that I touch on here, let us know in the comments or send us a message, and we'll try and do a longer presentation on that area. You ready to go, Tiff? You ready to go? Good, yes you are. Okay, so when it comes to pets, if if you are in a separation, you should definitely speak to your family lawyer about your pet, the relationship you have with your pet, how much care you've been giving your pet, what you do with your pet. Make sure you tell your family lawyer who the pet is registered under on their microchip and with their council, and if applicable with their organisation, if they're a registered dog or cat, with the Kennel Council or Feline Control Council in your applicable state. These things can all be taken into account, as well as the value of the pet and who paid for the puppy or the kitten. So these things can be taken into account, and if you are doing property orders, you want the pets to be included in the property orders, not the parenting orders, the property orders, so that there's no doubt who is getting to keep the pet or pets of the household. So that's number one. I don't want to focus though on separation and orders, because we've talked quite a bit about that from our actual family lawyers. As you know, I am not a dedicated family lawyer here at TBA Law. I focus in other areas, so civil and commercial, for example. So this is where issues of ownership and those sort of things come up, because they can often also fall across into the civil section. So I have recently read a couple of cases that have been quite interesting, and they're looking at pets, but of who gets custody of the dog or something like that, and they don't just look at okay, well, this person paid for it and they registered it with council and they've got the microchip. I mean, all that stuff is very, very strong evidence. But if that's what they did, but it was always meant as, it was obvious that it was meant as a gift, as a gift for the say another person, or the other person has taken the lion's share in the care, and they could perhaps be, and training of the animal, that has also been taken into account. But essentially what's happened is the courts are kind of left it open to a case-by-case sort of a basis at this point. So it's going to be a really, really interesting area of law to follow without getting into the nitty-gritty of it in this, as to where it goes, because I do sense that it's on the cusp. It's on the cusp of taking other things into account that 10, 20, 30 years ago would not even be considered taken into account. So I think that's pretty exciting. So then we go from the issues of separation and of ownership, or even of ownership, right back to even getting the puppy or the kitten, or I mean, I suppose your bird, rat, fish, but you generally see their puppies, kittens, ponies as the ones that sort of tend to crop up. So when you first purchase your puppy or kitten, or dog or cat, have you signed a contract with the breeder or the supplier or the person you're getting the animal from? And what's in that contract? Because that can often influence and impact what may happen. So you might have signed a contract to say that you've paid less for the animal than you normally would, because the breeder of the animal is owed a litter from that animal when they're older. So that's something that's a contractual obligation between two private parties, and it is a contractual obligation. So you need to take that into account. So that necessarily won't change ownership. You might have issues with ownership if you have an animal but you've got it in, say you're only a partner. You're a partner with the breeder or with somebody else. This isn't your private relationship, marriage partner. You might be in partnership with somebody with the animal that's also involved in that breed of dog or cat. You could have issues there, and this is something that's cropping up more, and I'm seeing more and more of this sort of thing cropping up, where you have issues where there's been a falling out of the partnership, and then what happens to the dog or the cat? Who owns it? What's the liabilities for it? And can one party buy the other party out, essentially, and those sort of things. So that's something that you can also look at, keeping in mind if you can reach a agreement with the the party without having to go through the cost of court or tribunal. It can be a benefit because often, I mean, dogs especially are getting more and more expensive to buy, and they can some can be very valuable. So, but you do need to take that into account when you're thinking about how much you're going to spend on whether or not you'd be cheaper to just actually agree to buy your share, the other person's share out, because you're going to spend that in legal fees anyway. So that's something that as a lawyer I probably shouldn't be telling you, because, you know, as lawyers we're supposed to want you to come to us and we work for you. But having said that, we also want the best outcome for you. And the best outcome for you sometimes is for you to try to work that out. You might need the help of a lawyer to do that. So other things to note is with council and microchips, you need to know whose name that is under. You'll need to have, if there's a change of ownership with your fur baby, you're going to need to have that reflected in council. So especially if there's a change to the location or the residence that the pet's being housed at, and both parties will need to do that, and you'll need to also deal with the microchip, and the microchip will need to be changed to reflect that as well, if the microchip's in somebody else's name, of course. So there's some things that you need to be aware of. If the animal is registered with a controlling body, you should also have that have the animal signed over to the person that's getting them, and both parties will need to be signing the pedigree or the whatever it might be. In the case of dogs, it's a pedigree, and being able to transfer that. So that's what happens if things go wrong. Things can also go a bit wrong if you have purchased your fur baby and all sorts of things start happening. So what we're sort of leaning into a little bit now is Australian consumer law. So the one thing that you can say about these guys is that they are covered under the Australian consumer law, or ACL. So this is legislation about the provision of goods and services, and this is very relevant because it's for normal household use up to 40,000. So clearly pets, purchase of pets or the services provided for the benefit of pets are included under this legislation. So those guarantees that we've talked about before, and I'll briefly touch on them now. If you're interested in consumer law in a generic basis, we've talked about goods and services, and there's some blogs on our website. You'll also find a couple of Facebook Lives from me talking about this as well in more detail. So with the ACL stuff, you'll need to make sure that the dog or cat's fit for purpose and as advertised. If it's a service, it is delivered in a reasonable time with due care and skill, and those sort of things. If you're advertising or responding to an advertisement for a dog, cat, fish, horse, bird, you can rely on what is said in that advertisement, and that's where, if you're advertising a fur baby for sale, you do need to be aware of what you are saying, what you are promising, and what the other person is saying that the purpose is that they want. Now, obviously, when you're talking about a live animal, you are not talking about a television set where it works or it doesn't, and this is you push the button, it turns on, and you change the channel, and it does this and it does that, and it'll connect to the internet, and it'll blah 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 blah. And hey, it's not connecting to the internet. It's not what I made it very clear that I wanted a smart TV that would connect to the internet. This one doesn't, so it's not fit for the purpose that you've advertised them for what I want. That's quite a bit more cut and dry. With animals, obviously, they will grow, they will change, they will be influenced as well by what you do with them. So you are not taking this whole thing, Miss Muppet. Thank you, good girl. So what you need to be aware of that, and the law is going to take that into account. If you buy a dog as a hunting dog, and it's come from a line of great hunters, and its parents were great hunters, and you can see, and the breeder can see, that it's showing all the right traits to be a great hunter, but as it gets older, it has a scare, and it suddenly doesn't like loud noises, so all of a sudden it's not going to go hunting because the gun scares it. Well, it's going to be very, very difficult to try to say that you were misled or it was not as advertised, because at the time there was no sign of that. Now, if the breeder or the supplier knew that dog was gun shy before they sold it to you, and they knew that you wanted a dog to take hunting with you, well then you could have a claim under the ACL that they knew that was your purpose, and they knew that this dog was gun shy, so it wasn't fit for that purpose. Obviously, if you're buying a pedigree purebred dog or cat, you're going to be able to know the traits, be able to predict the traits much easier, even with the huge influx in designer dogs specifically. People will often look at designer dogs and they think that they know exactly what traits they were getting, and you can see often in designer dogs advertisements saying that these dogs are hypoallergenic, they're suitable for people with allergies, they don't shed. Well, only half of their breeding doesn't shed, so the other half of their breeding does. So you don't know if you're going to get a puppy that's going to shed or not. You don't know if you're going to get a puppy that's going to shed into its own coat and mat. So be very aware of that when you are looking to purchase your next fur baby. You can only go on the breeding or the breeding mix, the traits of the dog or the traits of the mix of the dog and the cat as well, although the designer craze hasn't quite hit the cat world like it has the dog world. You can only go by that. So when you're predicting size and those sort of things, of course these are growing animals, so they can vary, and you need to allow a little bit for that, but you also need to not make grandiose statements, or if you're relying on grandiose statements and things that are very obvious, then you have possibly got a claim. So consumer law, very important in the purchase of your fur baby, but of course once you've got your fur baby, you're going to look after it. So you might, for example, you might have bought that designer dog, or you might have decided that no, you definitely want to make sure you've got hypoallergenic, so you've gone with purebred poodle, say, for example, or you might have gone, no, we're going to get that labradoodle, and you're going to need to be taking that dog to the groomers for every 6 weeks for a bath and a trim. That's a service, so that's covered under consumer law. So they need to abide by the consumer law, and they need to be able to uphold those guarantees, and you cannot contract out of any of these guarantees. So they can't make you sign a contract to say that by bringing your dog to their salon that you are accepting that they are going to complete this work with due care and skill. And then you come back after your dog's been trimmed and you find that they've nicked its ear and its ear's been bleeding and it's needed medical attention. Well, that is not due care and skill from a professional groomer. That is why you take your dog to a professional groomer, so things like that does not happen. And they cannot say, well, you signed it will be due care and skill, because you cannot contract out of something like that. So that's where your consumer law, that's where your consumer law comes into things there as well. It also comes into it with veterinary, and there's also other laws with veterinary regarding payment of bills, and also best interest of the animal and whether or not the animal can be released to you. That's another area of law. There's so many areas of law here that you can cover when you're talking about fur babies. That's another area of law that is changing or appears to be changing, and so it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes. Where it's coming a little bit away from the basic thing of property and a lien over the animal as property for a bill to be paid, and the fact that the animal is in fact a sentient being that is going to feel stress and those sort of things. So this is also really important, really interesting stuff that's coming out of the law at the moment, and it's really, really exciting to see what's going on. So on the one hand, yes, they are still considered property. They are still covered under consumer law. Services are still covered under consumer law. You could still be contractually bound by You could still be contractually bound by an agreement that you have signed at the time of purchase of the dog or the cat or the fur baby. So all those things all those areas do come in. And then if you're looking at separation, you are looking at family law, but you are looking at them as in your property orders, not in your parenting orders, no matter what you think about your fur baby that, no, it's my child. It's that the law is going to see it as property, but it needs to be discussed, and it is moving a little bit because you do see judges looking at other areas of the fur baby's life as opposed to just who paid for it and where the registration is, although that's still something that they definitely take into account. So I think it's a pretty exciting area, to be honest, because I think that the law is just starting to catch up a little bit with how society feels about their animals, and it's something that we're keeping watch on, and it's something that I'm hoping I'll be able to bring you more information on down the track, because it is some really exciting judgments coming out of it when you find them. So Google it, guys. No, sorry, I shouldn't be telling you that, but yeah, no, there's some really exciting stuff coming out of the law reports. So we've talked a little bit about services, we've talked a little bit about separation, we've talked a little bit about actual purchase and those sort of things. And this can also go right down to the very end of your fur baby, when you're looking at when your fur baby passes away. There's now services that you can, cremation services that you can use if you don't want to just bury your baby in the backyard. So that's something that a lot of people are taking more advantage of. These are services. So again, they are covered under Australian consumer law. You'll probably also sign some form of something which has some terms and conditions on it, which could also bind you. So they are not allowed to just go and burn a whole heap of anything and just throw you back some ashes and tell them that's your dog or your cat, because that is not due care and skill. That is not what is advertised. And so, and they need to be able to get it back to you in a reasonable time. So they can't be 2 months later, you're still waiting for the ashes to be returned. So although this is a rather sad area, it's also something that, again, you go back, 30, 40, 50 years, nobody's doing anything like that. Just, your animal dies, bury it in the backyard. But this is something that more and more people are doing, and it is because more and more people are seeing their fur babies as part of their families and not seeing them as just some piece of property that they own. I don't think any of us would consider our fur baby just some piece of property that we own, akin to their favourite chair or their iPhone. Although iPhones are an interesting thing. We won't get into that. So these are some areas that, as I say, there's so much going on and there's so much to cover, because the purchase, the care, and for the medical treatment for your fur baby throughout its life, what happens at the end, and whether or not along the way there are issues with families separating and couples separating, and then they've got kids, they've got dogs not kids or cats not kids, and that can get very, very full on. So these are all things that you need to think about when you're looking at your fur babies. I know, we're nearly done. You've got doggy daycares as well popping up, and doggy daycares, again, they're a service. They're going to include terms and conditions, they're going to include a contract, but they're also going to be bound by the ACL. And with any of these things, whether or not you're looking for a vet, whether you're looking for a groomer, whether you're looking for a doggy daycare, whether you're looking for a training organisation, some places will actually train and board. So they take your dog away, and you pay them to house your dog and train your dog while it's there, or you might just have boarding kennels while you're away on holidays or cattery. So all of these places, they need to provide these services, and they need to provide these services. It doesn't matter that they're dealing with that they're dealing with your pets. They're covered under the ACL. Exactly the same guarantees are given. I know. Have you had enough of this now? Yeah? You want to run around? I'm gonna go soon. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So all of these things you have to take into account. So what I've tried to do here is try to give you a really brief outline of all the different areas of law that you can get into with your fur baby, from commencement of your relationship with your fur baby right through to the end, and what can go wrong in between, what you can provide your fur baby, goods if you buy, you know, harness and lead set, and there's an issue with that, that's a good, that's consumer law, that's absolutely a good. So it needs to be fit for purpose, and as it's advertised, it needs to be. And so then you've got the repair, refund, replace policies coming in there. So with services, if someone takes too long with the service and you need to have it rectified another way, then reasonably foreseeable costs can be incurred by the original service provider. All of these things are already in law, and they apply in situations where you have these guys, where you have your fur babies. So do keep that in mind if things go wrong, because things can go wrong. And in the meantime, also do your due diligence. You're talking about your fur baby, you're talking about your pet, your surrogate child, you are talking about a living creature that you love and care about. So you are going to want to do your due diligence whenever you are doing whatever you're doing with your dog or your cat. You're going to want to make sure that you're going to want to check out reviews, see if you can go have somebody recommend a good groomer or a good transport service or a good vet or something like that when you're dealing with these sort of things, so that you can try to sort of separate out, just like you try to separate out a good breeder from a backyarder or a commercial just for profit breeder that really doesn't take a lot of health and well-being into consideration, or is just ignorant of a lot of things, then you can run into troubles just like that. You want to, all through your dog or your cat's life, you want to continue to do your due diligence, to continue to try to make sure that the service that you are taking your fur baby to is going to be a good service. It's not going to harm your animal, and it's going to be something that you're not going to then run into these issues, because if you do run into these issues, prevention is always better than cure. So if you can try and avoid these things, absolutely, you do it. But if things do go wrong and you can't sort it out yourself, speaking to a lawyer who has some experience with animal law in those areas, or has an interest in that's aware of some of these developments, is often a good idea, and you can try to resolve the issue that you've got. Or at worst, if it's led to a lot of damage, illness or injury of the animal, or even the death of the animal, which is extremely sad, you can look at possible compensation. So that's your fur babies. And of course, what I've tried to cover here is legal. So this doesn't take away from any of the things that you need to do with your fur baby to be a good owner, provide. We need to finish this off by just always reminding people about providing good quality food, water, shelter, exercise, stimulation, veterinary care, and all those sort of things. Yes, I know. Yeah, I know. We need to look after you. Yeah. And all of those sort of things. So you do all of that, and then when you're looking for your provision of services, and when you're looking for purchase of goods, that's where you start looking at these sort of things. And you hope that the worst doesn't happen, and you don't need to be in that position, but you do need to be aware of what you can do in those situations if that situation arises for you. So I hope that this has been of some help and assistance to you. I've tried to order it as sensibly as possible so that you can follow along with what I'm saying. But again, when you're trying to just push so much information from so many different areas, everything from property orders to contractual law to consumer law to services, it's a lot to try to sort of all get into one succinct presentation. So I've done my best to do that for you, and I've had little Tiffany here, who's been assisting me as my VIP and assistant co-host. You have, and she's a 3-month-old puppy at the moment. So yeah, so that's the sort, and of course it's the sort of thing that you need to look at whenever you're looking at your animals. And I hope I'll be able to bring to you, either in blogs or in further Facebook Lives, as time progresses, as we move forward, some further updates on some of the things that are just happening at the moment. But I've been keeping an eye on some of the judgments that's been coming out, specifically on the ownership of dogs and animals, and dealing with partnerships, breeding partnerships and ownership partnerships and those sort of things as well, that are happening now, so that we can stay abreast with some of these changes. But it is one of those things that, I think I'm excited. I think the law is finally starting to slowly catch up to what the society, or at least Western society, at least is in the law in our country is finally catching up with how we actually feel about our pets. Yeah, that's right. So we must thank Tiffany for coming along and helping me out with this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to take something from it. Again, if there's anything I've talked about, because I've only briefly touched on things, or there's anything I've talked about that you would like more information about, drop us a line, drop us a comment, and we'll try and endeavour to do a blog or a future Facebook Live focusing more on that area. And from there, we'll be able to assist you further. So, all right, so that's all from me. I haven't spoken about the residential tenancies changes and pets in residential houses. I have not covered that here, but if you want more information about that, you can always drop us a line, and we can give you some more information about that, because there's some changes happening there too. So keep watch. We got changes. Oh, did you drop it? Okay, good girl. There you go. And I will be very happy to see you all again in a few weeks' time for my next Facebook Live. Have fun. Have a great day.